Hey everyone, hope you're doing great. Welcome back to my channel. In today's video, we'll dive into what if Deku could see ghosts. Smash that subscribe button, and be sure to peek at the description below. Let's begin. The first time 4-year-old Izuku Midoriya saw a ghost, he thought it was just another person walking down the street. The translucent woman wore outdated hero costume, floating a few inches above the ground as she passed through the busy shopping district. What caught his attention wasn't her ethereal appearance. His young mind hadn't yet learned to distinguish between the living and the dead, but rather the gentle smile she gave him as their eyes met. "Mommy, mommy! Look at that hero!" Izuku tugged at his mother's sleeve, pointing excitedly at the floating figure. Inko Midoriya glanced in the direction her son indicated, seeing nothing but bustling shoppers. "Where, sweetie? I don't see any heroes." "Right there. The lady in the white and black costume," Izuku insisted, his green eyes wide with wonder. "She's floating," Inko chuckled softly, assuming it was just her son's vibrant imagination at work. After all, Izuku had been obsessed with heroes since he could walk, filling notebook after notebook with drawings of All Might and other pros. "That's nice, dear. Now let's get your new All Might action figure, shall we?" But the spectral hero had stopped, turning to face Izuku fully. Her costume, now that he could see it clearly, was a simple white bodysuit with black accents, and her dark hair was pulled back in a ponytail. What struck him most was the warmth in her eyes. They reminded him of his mother's. "You can see me, little one?" she asked, her voice carrying a strange echo that Izuku would soon learn was characteristic of all spirits. Izuku nodded enthusiastically, not understanding why she seemed surprised. "Of course. Are you a pro hero? What's your quirk? Can you fly?" "That's so cool." The ghost hero knelt before him, her form flickering slightly. "My name is Nana Shimura. And you, young man, are very special." That was the beginning of Izuku Midoriya's journey into a world that existed parallel to the one everyone else knew. A world populated by those who had passed on but hadn't quite left, their unfinished business keeping them tethered to the mortal realm. The doctor's office was cold and sterile, much like the news he delivered. "I'm sorry, Mrs. Midoriya, but your son is quirkless." 4-year-old Izuku sat on the examination table, his small legs dangling over the edge as he tried to process what the doctor was saying. The X-ray of his foot showed the extra joint that condemned him to a life without a quirk. But that can't be right," Izuku protested weakly. "I can see them. The people others can't see. That has to be my quirk." The doctor adjusted his glasses, looking at Izuku with pity. Now, young man. Having an active imagination is wonderful, but it's not a quirk. The extra joint in your pinky toe is conclusive evidence." Inko held her son's hand tightly, fighting back tears. "Izuku, sweetie." But Izuku wasn't listening anymore. His attention was drawn to the corner of the room, where an elderly man in a hospital gown stood watching the scene unfold. The man's form was slightly transparent, and a tag on his wrist showed a date from 3 months ago. The ghost caught Izuku's eye and smiled sadly. "They won't understand, kid. They never do." That night, Izuku cried himself to sleep watching his favorite All Might video, the words "You can be a hero" playing over and over. But unlike most nights, he wasn't alone. Nana Shimura sat beside his bed, her ghostly hand hovering over his head in a gesture of comfort she couldn't quite complete. "Don't give up, little one," she whispered. "This gift of yours, it's not a quirk, but it's special in its own way." As the years passed, Izuku learned to navigate his unique ability. The spirits were everywhere, in schools, hospitals, streets, and homes. Some were recent deaths, confused and scared about their situation. Others were older spirits, those who had chosen to remain for various reasons. Many were former heroes, still watching over the cities they had once protected. Nana became a constant presence in his life, though she never explained why she stayed. She taught him about the different types of spirits, and how to interact with them safely. More importantly, she helped him understand that his ability, while not a quirk, could still be used to help others. "Remember, young Midoriya," she would say during their conversations in his room, "both the living and the dead need heroes." At school, things were different. Izuku's habit of talking to invisible presences earned him strange looks and whispered comments. Katsuki Bakugo, his childhood friend turned bully, was particularly cruel about it. Look at Deku, talking to his imaginary friends again. Bakugo would taunt, his palms crackling with small explosions. Guess being quirkless wasn't pathetic enough for you, huh? The ghosts urged him to fight back, to stand up for himself, but Izuku couldn't bring himself to. How could he explain that the imaginary friends were actually the spirits of the dead? That sometimes they taught him things about heroics that even the teachers didn't know? One day, during his final year of elementary school, Izuku encountered a spirit that would change his perspective forever. He was walking home when he noticed a small girl, no more than 6, sitting on a swing in an empty playground. She was clearly a spirit. Her form was translucent, and she wore clothes that seemed to be from a few years ago. "Hello," Izuku said softly, approaching the swing set. "Are you okay?" The girl looked up, surprised that someone could see her. You can see me?" Izuku nodded, sitting on the swing next to her. "I'm Izuku." "What's your name?" "Hana," she replied, her voice trembling. "I'm waiting for my mom. She said she'd pick me up from the playground, but..." Tears began falling from her ethereal eyes. That was 3 years ago. Izuku's heart clenched. He'd met many spirits, but the children were always the hardest to deal with. "What happened, Hana?" The girl's story came out in broken sobs. She'd been playing at the playground when a villain attack occurred nearby. In the chaos, she'd been hit by debris. Her mother, who had just left to buy ice cream from a nearby store, never made it back. She'd been caught in the same attack. "But Mom promised she'd come back," Hana insisted. "So I have to wait here." Izuku spent the next few hours talking to Hana, explaining gently what had happened. With Nana's guidance, who had appeared shortly after he began talking to the girl, he helped Hana understand that her mother wasn't coming back, because she too had passed on. "But where did she go?" Hana asked, her form flickering with distress. "To a better place," Nana answered, kneeling beside the ghost child. "And she's waiting for you there, little one. You don't have to wait here anymore." It took time and patience, but eventually, Hana's spirit began to glow with a warm light. I can feel her," she whispered, a smile breaking through her tears. "Mommy's calling me." Izuku and Nana watched as Hana's spirit faded away, not in the usual flicker of a disturbed ghost, but in a gentle shimmer of golden light. The playground felt lighter somehow, as if a weight had been lifted from it. "This is why you have this gift, young Midoriya," Nana said, placing her spectral hand on his shoulder. "Not all heroics involve fighting villains. Sometimes, being a hero means helping lost souls find their way home." That night, Izuku started a new notebook. Unlike his hero analysis books, this one was dedicated to understanding spirits. He wrote down everything he'd learned from Nana and his experiences: how to identify different types of spirits, their common behaviors, ways to help them move on. At the top of the first page, he wrote, "Ghost analysis for the future." But his newfound purpose came with challenges. The more he embraced his ability, the more spirits sought him out. They would appear in his classroom, distracting him during lessons. They would follow him home, begging for help with unfinished business. Some nights, he could barely sleep as spirits of villain attack victims recounted their final moments, seeking closure. Inko noticed the dark circles under her son's eyes, his increasing distraction, the way he would jump at seemingly nothing. She worried constantly, taking him to doctors and counselors, none of whom could explain his behavior. They suggested everything from stress to attention disorders, but Izuku couldn't tell them the truth. "Mom," he said one evening, after a particularly difficult day of dodging both Bakugo's bullying and persistent spirits, what if I told you I really can see things others can't?" Inko paused in her cooking, turning to look at her son with concern. "Izuku, not as a quirk," he quickly added, "but something else. Something real." Before Inko could respond, a new spirit materialized in their kitchen, a middle-aged man in a business suit, looking confused and distressed. "Can someone help me? I was on my way to an important meeting, but something's wrong." Izuku couldn't help but react, his eyes tracking the spirit's movement. Inko followed his gaze, seeing nothing but their empty kitchen. "Izuku, you're scaring me," she said softly. "Maybe we should talk to Dr. Tsubasa again." "Never mind," Izuku mumbled, slumping in his chair. "I was just thinking out loud." That night, as Izuku lay in bed, Nana appeared as she often did. It's hard, isn't it? Being between worlds? Why me? Izuku asked, staring at his All Might poster. Why can I see spirits when nobody else can? What's the point if I can't even tell anyone about it? Nana was quiet for a moment, her form seeming more solid than usual in the darkness of his room. Sometimes the greatest heroes are the ones whose work goes unseen. You might not have a flashy quirk, young Midoriya, but you have something equally valuable, the ability to bring peace to those who need it most. She paused, her expression growing serious. And something tells me your gift will be more important than you know in the years to come. Izuku sat up, intrigued. What do you mean? But Nana just smiled mysteriously, her form already beginning to fade. Get some rest, little one. Tomorrow's another day to be a hero, even if nobody knows it but you and us spirits. As Izuku drifted off to sleep, his last thought was of the notebook hidden under his bed, filled with observations about the world of spirits. Maybe he couldn't be a hero like All Might, with amazing powers and public acclaim, but he could be something else, a bridge between the world of the living and the dead, helping lost souls find their way home. He didn't know it yet, but this was just the beginning of his journey. The spirits around him, particularly Nana, could sense that greater things awaited this kind-hearted boy who could see the unseen. For now, though, he was simply Izuku Midoriya, the boy who saw too much, learning to navigate a world that was far more complex and mysterious than anyone else realized. As he slept, spirits of heroes past gathered in his room, watching over the boy who would one day bridge their world with the world of the living. Among them, Nana Shimura smiled, knowing that her successor's successor would forge a path unlike any other, a path that would redefine what it meant to be a hero. With the quiet scene of Izuku's room, filled with All Might memorabilia and his growing collection of notebooks. On his desk, the Ghost Analysis for the Future notebook lies open, its pages filled with observations and theories about the spirit world. And in the corner, invisible to all but him, Nana Shimura stands guard, watching over the boy who would one day inherit not just One for All, but the responsibility of being a hero to both the living and the dead. In the distance, the spirits of past heroes gather, drawn to the unique energy of this quirkless boy who could see them. They whisper among themselves about the future, about the darkness gathering on the horizon, and about the role this young medium would play in the battles to come. But for now, Izuku sleeps peacefully, unaware of the destiny that awaits him, a destiny that would prove that sometimes the greatest quirk isn't a quirk at all, but the ability to see what others cannot, and the courage to act on behalf of those who can no longer act for themselves. Middle school brought new challenges for Izuku Midoriya. While his classmates' quirks grew stronger and more refined, his ability to see spirits only intensified, making it increasingly difficult to maintain any semblance of normalcy. The ghosts were everywhere now, and they all seemed to know about the green-haired boy who could see them. The morning started like any other, with Izuku walking to Aldera Junior High. As usual, he wasn't alone, though to any observer, he appeared to be. Walking beside him was the spirit of a former pro-hero, Nightwalker, who had taken to mentoring the boy after hearing about him through the ghostly grapevine. Remember, kid, Nightwalker said, his dark costume rippling in a wind only spirits could feel. Being a hero isn't just about fighting villains. It's about being there for people when they need you most. Even if those people are already dead? Izuku asked quietly, careful to keep his voice down as other students passed by. Nightwalker nodded, his translucent form flickering in the morning sun. Especially then. The living have plenty of heroes to look up to. The dead? They only have you. Before Izuku could respond, a familiar explosive voice cut through the air. Oh, Deku! Talking to your imaginary friends again? Katsuki Bakugo stood at the school gate, his crimson eyes narrowed with contempt. A small group of his followers snickered behind him, their quirks activated in subtle displays of intimidation. Keikaken, Izuku stammered, instinctively taking a step back. Beside him, Nightwalker's form darkened with anger. This kid needs a serious attitude adjustment, the ghost hero growled, though only Izuku could hear him. Want me to walk through him? The cold spot might teach him some manners. Izuku subtly shook his head. The last thing he needed was to escalate things with Bakugo. Besides, he'd learned early on that while spirits could create cold spots and minor disturbances, their ability to affect the physical world was limited. You're even more pathetic than usual lately, Bakugo sneered, walking up to Izuku. Not only are you quirkless, but you're actually going crazy, talking to yourself, writing in those creepy notebooks about spirits and ghosts. He grabbed Izuku's collar, small explosions popping in his free hand. You're making everyone who knows you look bad. I'm not crazy, Izuku protested weakly, even as more spirits gathered around them, drawn to the conflict. I just what? See dead people? Bakugo laughed harshly. Face it, Deku. You're nothing but a quirkless loser who can't accept reality. You'll never be a hero. The words stung, as they always did, but Izuku had heard them so many times they'd almost lost their edge. Almost. What hurt more was seeing the pity in the eyes of the spirits around him, heroes who had given their lives protecting others, now forced to watch as their successor was bullied. Later that day, during lunch break, Izuku sat alone on the roof, or as alone as he ever was these days. Nana Shimura had appeared, as she often did when he was feeling down. You can't let him get to you, she said, sitting cross-legged in the air beside him. Bakugo doesn't understand what you're capable of. Maybe he's right, Izuku mumbled, picking at his food. What kind of hero talks to ghosts? It's not exactly useful for saving people. Nana's form flickered with intensity. Isn't it? Just this week, you helped 3 spirits find peace. You prevented a suicide by passing on a message from a dead mother to her daughter. You warned that elderly couple about a gas leak because their deceased neighbor spotted it. But I can't tell anyone about those things, Izuku protested. They either think I'm crazy or making things up for attention. Sometimes came a new voice, the greatest heroes are the ones who work in shadows. Izuku looked up to see another spirit materializing, this one wearing a tattered hero costume he recognized from his research. You're Underground Hero Shadowcast. You were active 20 years ago, the spirit nodded, a smile crossing his scarred face. And you're the medium everyone in the spirit world is talking about. Mind if I join your lunch break? Before Izuku could respond, the roof door burst open. Bakugo and his cronies stepped out, immediately spotting him. Well, Bakugo sneered, having a little tea party with your ghost friends, Deku? Izuku quickly stood up, gathering his things. But Shadowcast moved between them, his spectral form radiating protective energy. You know, the ghost hero said, even though only Izuku could hear him, there's more than one way to handle a bully. Want to learn some underground hero techniques? Despite the situation, Izuku found himself intrigued. He gave a tiny nod. First lesson, Shadowcast continued, information is power. What do you know about your opponent? As Bakugo approached, Izuku's mind raced through years of observation. His quirk makes him sweat nitroglycerin-like substance. He's stronger in hot weather, but in cold. Exactly, Shadowcast grinned. Now, remember how spirits can affect temperature? Understanding dawned on Izuku's face. He glanced at Nana, who nodded approvingly. Hey, Kaken, Izuku said, his voice steadier than usual. It's pretty hot today, isn't it? Bakugo paused, thrown off by the unusual response. What are you? Suddenly, the temperature around them dropped dramatically as every spirit on the roof concentrated their energy. Bakugo's palms, raised for an explosion, produced only small sparks. What the hell? He growled, trying repeatedly to generate his usual explosions. And must be a weather thing, Izuku suggested innocently, backing toward the door. Maybe we should all go inside. He made his escape while Bakugo was still trying to figure out what had happened to his quirk. Once safely in the stairwell, Izuku let out a shaky breath. Not bad, kid, Shadowcast approved. Using your opponent's weaknesses without actually fighting. That's Underground Hero 101. But I still ran away, Izuku sighed. Strategic retreat, Nana corrected. Besides, sometimes the best victories are the ones nobody else knows about. That afternoon, Izuku found himself helping another spirit, this time, a young hero in training who had died during his provisional license exam. The ghost, Takashi, was stuck repeating his final moments, trying desperately to save civilians who had long since been rescued by other heroes. They're safe, Izuku assured him, standing in the empty lot where the exam had taken place months ago. You did everything you could, but I failed, Takashi's spirit insisted, going through the motions of lifting invisible rubble. I couldn't save them, couldn't get my license. Actually, came Nightwalker's voice as the elder hero's spirit appeared, you did save them. Your actions gave the other examinees time to evacuate everyone. They awarded you your license posthumously. Takashi's form flickered, his movements finally stilling. They did? Izuku nodded, pulling out his ghost analysis notebook. I researched it. Your sacrifice inspired changes in the exam protocol. They now emphasize teamwork more than individual heroics. You helped make future heroes safer. The young spirit's form began to glow softly. I did make a difference. More than you know, Nightwalker assured him. Ready to move on? Takashi looked at Izuku, smiling. Thank you for helping me understand. Maybe you're more of a hero than you realize. As the spirit faded away peacefully, Izuku added another entry to his notebook. These moments, helping spirits find peace, were becoming more frequent. Each one taught him something new about heroics, about life and death, about the complex web of connections that bound both worlds together. The next day brought an encounter that would change everything. Izuku was taking his usual route home, documenting his latest spiritual encounters in his notebook, when he heard screams from up ahead. Running toward the commotion, he found a crowd gathered around an underpass where a villain made of sludge had taken a hostage. But what caught his attention wasn't just the villain, it was the spirits gathering around the scene. They were agitated, pointing at something Izuku couldn't quite see through the crowd. He's here! One ghost exclaimed excitedly. All Might is here! Izuku's heart leaped. All Might? Here? He pushed through the crowd just in time to see his idol burst forth from a manhole cover, his legendary smile blazing. Have no fear! Why? Because I am here. What happened next was a blur of action as All Might swiftly defeated the villain, capturing him in 2 soda bottles. But what truly caught Izuku's attention was Nana's sudden appearance, her spectral form more solid than he'd ever seen it. Tashinori, she whispered, reaching out toward All Might with an expression of such longing that Izuku's heart ached. Before he could process this reaction, All Might was preparing to leave. Panic seized Izuku. He had so many questions, both about being a hero and about Nana's connection to the symbol of peace. Without thinking, he grabbed onto All Might's leg just as the hero launched himself into the air. The following conversation on the rooftop would have been life-changing enough on its own, with All Might revealing his true form and the limitations of his power. But what made it truly extraordinary was watching Nana's spirit hover protectively over the skeletal hero, her eyes filled with pride and worry. Young man, All Might said in his deflated form, without a quirk, I cannot in good conscience say you can become a hero. It's not bad to dream, but you need to be realistic. The words hit Izuku like a physical blow, made worse by the pain he saw in Nana's expression. But before he could respond, the sound of explosions drew their attention to another crisis. The sludge villain had escaped and taken a new hostage. Racing to the scene, Izuku's heart stopped when he saw who the victim was, Bakugo. The spirits around the scene were in chaos, some trying uselessly to help, others calling out warnings that only Izuku could hear. What happened next would be talked about for weeks. Without thinking, Izuku rushed in, guided by the spirits of fallen heroes who pointed out the safest path through the debris. His notebook, thrown with precision advised by Shadowcast's ghost, provided a moment's distraction. His knowledge of the terrain, whispered by local spirits who had watched over this street for years, helped him maintain his footing. And when All Might, inspired by Izuku's bravery, stepped in to save them both, Nana Shimura's spirit stood behind him, her power seeming to flow into her successor for one brilliant moment. That evening, as Izuku walked home in a daze, still processing All Might's words about him being worthy to become a hero, Nana appeared beside him. There's something you should know, she said, her form unusually serious. About All Might, about One for All, and about why I've stayed with you all these years. Izuku stopped walking, turning to face the spirit who had been his guardian and mentor for so long. What do you mean? The power All Might will pass on to you. It's more than just a quirk. It's a legacy, a connection between souls. Nana's form flickered with emotion. And you, with your ability to see spirits, might be the first wielder who can truly understand its full nature. All Might, he was your successor, wasn't he? Izuku asked, pieces falling into place. That's why you reacted so strongly to seeing him. Nana nodded. And now you will be his. The path ahead won't be easy, young Midoriya. You'll face challenges in both the world of the living and the dead. But I believe you were given your ability for a reason. Perhaps it's time for one for all to have a wielder who can bridge both worlds. As they stood there in the gathering dusk, more spirits appeared, heroes of the past, watching this moment of transition. Among them, Izuku recognized faces from his history books, legends whose deaths had shaped the world of heroics. We'll help you, Shadowcast promised, stepping forward. All of us. You won't be alone in this journey. A new kind of hero, Nightwalker added, for both the living and the dead. Izuku looked at them all, these spirits who had guided and protected him for so long. Then he looked at his hands, thinking of the power All Might had promised to pass on. Perhaps this was why he could see ghosts, not as a replacement for a quirk, but as preparation for something greater. I'll do my best, he promised, both to All Might's future gift and to the spirits who had believed in him when no one else did. I'll become a hero who can help everyone, no matter which side of the veil they're on. As he walked home, the spirits of heroes past followed, their forms creating a ghostly honor guard, and in the lead, Nana Shimura smiled, knowing that the power she had passed to Toshinori would soon find its way to this remarkable boy who could see what others couldn't. The sun set on Izuku's last day as a quirkless medium, heralding the dawn of something new, a fusion of physical and spiritual power that would change the world of heroes forever. His dreams, once haunted by the weight of his perceived uselessness, now blazed with possibility. For in this moment, standing between the world of the living and the dead, Izuku Midoriya wasn't just the boy who saw too much, he was becoming the hero who would bridge two worlds, carrying the hopes of both the living and the dead on his shoulders. And somewhere in the gathering darkness, a shadow stirred, a presence that made even the bravest spirits tremble. For if Izuku could see the heroes who had passed on, what other spirits might he encounter? What darker entities might be drawn to this unique power? But those were concerns for another day. For now, Izuku had training to prepare for, a power to inherit, and a destiny to fulfill. And as always, he wouldn't face it alone, for even in his dreams, the spirits of heroes past would watch over him, guiding his steps toward a future that would redefine what it meant to be a hero. With Izuku opening his ghost analysis notebook one last time as a quirkless student, adding a new section titled One for All and the Spirit World. Above him, unseen by all but him, the spirits of past heroes gathered, ready to help forge a new kind of symbol of peace, one who could fight for justice in both life and death. The morning sun had barely risen over Dagoba Municipal Beach when Izuku arrived, his breath forming small clouds in the cool air. He wasn't alone, he never was these days. Nana Shimura's spirit hovered nearby, along with a growing assembly of ghostly heroes who had gathered to witness what was about to unfold. Are you ready? Nana asked, her spectral form particularly clear in the dawn light. Before Izuku could answer, All Might appeared in his skeletal form, carrying a small trash bag. The moment he arrived, Izuku noticed something extraordinary, a faint golden glow connecting All Might to Nana's spirit, visible only to his unique perception. Young Midoriya! All Might called out, transforming briefly into his hero form. I hope you're prepared for your first day of training. As All Might explained his plan to clean the beach, Izuku couldn't help but be distracted by the increasing number of spirits gathering around them. They weren't just random ghosts. These were the previous users of One for All, drawn to this moment of transition. All Might, Izuku began hesitantly, before we start, there's something I should tell you. The skeletal hero tilted his head, blood occasionally dripping from his mouth as he spoke. What is it, my boy? Izuku took a deep breath, looking at Nana for encouragement. She nodded, moving to stand beside her former student. I can see spirits. Not as a quirk, but as something else. And right now, I can see her, your mentor, Nana Shimura. All Might's eyes widened, his gaunt face paling further. What did you say? She's been watching over you, Izuku continued, gaining confidence as Nana placed her spectral hand on All Might's shoulder. A gesture he couldn't feel but Izuku could clearly see. She's proud of you, Toshinori. All Might collapsed onto a nearby refrigerator, his hands trembling. Young Midoriya, how could you possibly know about Nana? Because I'm right here, Toshinori, Nana said, even though only Izuku could hear her. Tell him I never left. For the next hour, Izuku explained everything, his ability to see spirits, Nana's guidance throughout his childhood, and the gathering of previous one-for-all users he could now see. All Might listened in stunned silence, occasionally wiping tears from his sunken eyes. She's here now? All Might finally asked, his voice barely a whisper. Izuku nodded. She says she's sorry she couldn't protect you from All for One. But she's never stopped watching over you. All Might broke down then, decades of guilt and grief pouring out. Through Izuku, Nana was finally able to tell her successor everything she'd wanted to say for years. Her pride in his accomplishments, her sorrow for his injuries, her faith in his choice of successor. The training took on a new dimension after that revelation. As Izuku worked to clean the beach, he had not just All Might's guidance, but the combined wisdom of every previous one-for-all user. They shared their experiences, their techniques, their understanding of the power he would inherit. The key, explained the third user, a stern-looking spirit in ancient hero costume, is understanding that one-for-all isn't just physical power. It's a connection between souls. That's why you can see us so clearly, added the fourth, demonstrating a stance that Izuku quickly copied. Your spiritual awareness resonates with the vestiges within the quirk. The training was brutal. Moving refrigerators, cars, and mountains of trash pushed Izuku's body to its limits. But it was the spiritual training that truly challenged him. The ghosts taught him to channel their residual quirks temporarily, a skill that would prove invaluable once he inherited one-for-all. Focus, Nana instructed one evening, as Izuku struggled to maintain a connection with the second user's spirit. Feel the echo of their power. It's like a muscle. The more you use it, the stronger the connection becomes. Izuku strained, sweat dripping down his face as he attempted to manifest a spark of the second's quirk. For a brief moment, energy crackled around his hands, not one for all yet, but a ghostly impression of power. Good. The second user approved, his stern face breaking into a rare smile. You're getting it, kid. All Might watch these sessions with fascination, unable to see the spirits, but witnessing their effects through Izuku's training. Young Midoriya, your progress is remarkable. But remember, this power, one for all, it must remain a secret. Like my ability to see spirits, Izuku nodded, understanding. Some things are too dangerous to be widely known. The months passed, and Dagoba Beach slowly transformed. As Izuku cleared away the trash, he uncovered more than just sand and surf. He found spirits bound to various objects, helping them move on as he cleaned their anchors away. One particular spirit, a young woman who had drowned decades ago, had been trapped by an old locket buried in the sand. When Izuku found it and returned it to her family, her ghost finally found peace. These small acts of heroism, invisible to most, became as much a part of his training as the physical labor. You're becoming something unique, Nana observed one day, watching Izuku lift a heavy beam while simultaneously helping a confused spirit find its way. Not just a vessel for one for all, but a bridge between worlds. The other vestiges agreed. They had never seen anyone interact with their spiritual essences the way Izuku could. It was as if he was already part of one for all's legacy, even before receiving the quirk. Finally, the day of inheritance arrived. The beach gleamed in the morning sun, completely transformed by Izuku's efforts. As All Might prepared to pass on his power, the spirits of all previous users gathered in a circle around them. Young Midoriya, All Might began, plucking a hair from his head. Eat this. Wait, Izuku said, looking at the assembled spirits. There's something else we should try first. At Nana's suggestion, Izuku had been practicing a different method of inheritance, one that would acknowledge both the physical and spiritual aspects of one for all. He knelt on the clean sand, placing one hand over his heart. The previous users want to help, he explained to All Might. They say one for all is more than just DNA. It's a connection between souls. All Might watched in amazement as Izuku began to glow with a faint light, visible even to him. The spirits of previous users moved closer, their forms becoming more solid as they channeled their remaining energy. We acknowledge this successor, they spoke in unison, their voices creating a harmony only Izuku could hear. We offer our power, our knowledge, our spirits. When Izuku finally ate the hair, it wasn't just All Might's power he was receiving, it was the blessed approval of every previous user, their spiritual energy helping to smooth the transition. The first manifestation of one for all was unlike anything All Might had ever seen. Instead of the raw, uncontrolled power he expected. Izuku's body glowed with a steady light, the spirits of previous users visible even to normal eyes for a brief moment, as their power flowed through him. This is... All Might gasped, witnessing the true nature of his quirk for the first time. Young Midoriya, what are you seeing? Izuku stood in the center of a spiral of spiritual energy, each previous user's power flowing into him in steady streams. They're all here, he said, his voice overlaid with echoes of previous users. All the hopes, dreams, and powers of past heroes. I can feel them all. Nana stepped forward, her form more solid than ever as she placed her hand on Izuku's shoulder. This time, both he and All Might could feel it. The true power of One for All isn't just in its strength, she said, her voice clear to both of them for the first time. It's in the connections it creates, between past and present, between life and death, between all those who fight for justice. The moment passed, the spirits fading back to their usual transparent state, visible only to Izuku. But something had changed. The power of One for All hummed within him, not as a foreign entity but as a natural extension of his spiritual awareness. The following weeks were spent learning to control this new power. Unlike All Might's early experiences, Izuku found he could communicate with the quirk itself, the spirits of previous users helping him understand how to regulate its flow. Think of it like a river, the first user explained during one training session. You don't need to control every drop, just guide its course. Izuku practiced channeling small percentages of power, combining it with his ability to temporarily tap into the vestige's quirks. The result was something entirely new, a fighting style that incorporated both physical power and spiritual awareness. You're not just our successor, Nana told him one evening as he practiced. You're becoming a new kind of hero, one who can fight for both the living and the dead. All Might, watching Izuku train, couldn't help but feel a mix of pride and awe. The boy he'd chosen was exceeding every expectation, transforming One for All into something greater than it had ever been. Young Midoriya, he said during their final training session before the UA entrance exam, I believe you've discovered something about One for All that even I never knew. This power, it's always been more than just a quirk, hasn't it? Izuku nodded, looking at the assembled spirits of previous users, his predecessors, his teachers, his team. It's a legacy, All Might. Not just of power, but of souls dedicated to protecting others. And now, he activated One for All, green energy crackling around him as the spirits lent their strength. Now I can help them all. With Izuku standing on the clean beach at sunset, One for All flowing through him in controlled waves as he practices the movements taught to him by generations of heroes. Around him, visible only to his eyes, the spirits of previous users watch their successor prepare for the challenges ahead. He's ready, Nana says to her fellow vestiges, pride evident in her voice. More than ready, the first user agrees. He's going to change everything. All Might, watching from a distance, sees only his successor training diligently. But he feels something, a warmth, a presence, a sense of rightness that tells him he chose better than he could have ever known. And Izuku, standing between the worlds of the living and the dead, finally understands his true purpose. He isn't just going to be a hero who saves people. He's going to be a bridge, a guardian of both realms, carrying the hopes and dreams of generations in his heart. As the sun sets on his last day of preparation, Izuku looks at his hands, now capable of channeling both One for All's physical power and the spiritual energy of its previous users. Tomorrow, the UA entrance exam will begin his official journey to becoming a hero. But in many ways, he's already started. Not just as All Might's successor, but as the inheritor of a legacy that spans both life and death. The spirits of heroes past gather around him one last time, their forms creating a circle of ghostly light in the growing darkness. They've taught him everything they can. Now it's time for him to forge his own path, carrying their power and wisdom into a future that none of them could have imagined. Plus Ultra, Izuku whispers, and the spirits echo his words, their voices carrying on the wind as night falls over Dagoba Beach. Tomorrow, the world would begin to see what kind of hero he could become. But tonight, in this moment between day and night, between life and death, he stands ready, the boy who sees spirits, the inheritor of One for All, the bridge between worlds. And somewhere in the gathering darkness, watching unseen even by Izuku's spiritual sight, a shadow stirs. All for One's presence, though distant, sends a shiver through the spiritual realm. The true test of this unique successor is yet to come, when the powers of life and death clash in a battle that will shake both worlds to their foundations. But that's a story for another day. For now, Izuku Midoriya heads home, ready to face whatever challenges await him, knowing he carries not just one for all's power, but the spirits and wisdom of every hero who came before him. The legacy of the dead lives on in him, and through him, it will help shape the future of the living. The morning of the UA entrance exam dawned cold and clear, but Izuku Midoriya wasn't alone as he approached the imposing gates. Besides the living students streaming toward the entrance, spirits crowded the campus grounds, former students, teachers, and heroes who had passed on but remained connected to the prestigious institution. There are so many, Izuku whispered, his eyes tracking the ethereal forms that only he could see. UA has a long history, Nana explained, floating beside him. Many spirits are drawn to places of significance in their lives. Among the ghostly crowd, Izuku noticed several wearing outdated UA uniforms, probably students who had died before graduating. Others wore hero costumes from different eras, likely former teachers or pro-heroes who had maintained their connection to the school. "Look out!" a voice called just as Izuku stumbled. He caught himself before falling, turning to see a girl with round rosy cheeks. "Sorry. I should have been more careful. And no, it was my fault." Izuku stammered, both flustered by the girl's presence and distracted by the friendly spirit of an elderly hero who had moved to examine her with interest. "She has potential," the spirit commented, though only Izuku could hear. "Reminds me of my granddaughter. I'm Ochako Uraraka," the girl introduced herself with a bright smile. "Are you here for the hero course too?" Before Izuku could respond properly, a stern-looking boy with glasses approached them, lecturing about proper behavior before an exam. Izuku noticed the spirit in similar glasses, probably a relative, watching the boy with proud amusement. "Tenya always was like his brother," the spirit mused, adjusting his own spectral glasses. The written exam passed in a blur of concentrated effort, with Izuku occasionally distracted by helpful spirits pointing out details he might have missed. He had to resist the urge to thank them, knowing it would look strange to the other examinees. It was during present Mick's explanation of the practical exam that things got interesting. As the pro-hero described the different types of robots they would face, spirits of former examinees began sharing their experiences. "Watch out for the zero-pointer," one ghost warned, his UA uniform torn from what had presumably been his fatal encounter. "It's bigger than they let on. The three-pointers tend to have a blind spot on their left side," another spirit added, this one wearing hero costume from at least 2 decades ago. "That's still true, unless they've changed the design." Izuku discreetly jotted down notes, earning strange looks from nearby students. But he knew better than to ignore advice from those who had experienced the exam firsthand, even if they hadn't all survived it. When the practical exam began, Izuku was ready. One for all hummed through his body at a careful 5%, while the spirits of previous users stood ready to lend their guidance. What he wasn't prepared for was the number of spirits already present in the fake city. "They keep the robots here year-round," explained a ghostly UA staff member. "Sometimes accidents happen during maintenance. We stick around to warn the living when we can, though most can't hear us." Izuku nodded in understanding just as the exam began. Students rushed forward, but he held back momentarily, letting the spirits guide him to where he would be most needed. "Three-pointer coming around that corner," Nana called out. "And there's something else. A spirit trapped in the building to your right." Izuku made a split-second decision. While other examinees focused solely on the robots, he developed a dual strategy, fighting robots while helping any spirits he encountered. It wasn't just about points, it was about being the kind of hero who could help everyone, living or dead. The first rescue came when he found a confused spirit of a construction worker, killed during the building of the fake city. The man's spirit was tied to a piece of machinery, preventing him from moving on. While other students fought nearby robots, Izuku took a moment to help the spirit understand his situation and find peace. "Thank you," the spirit said as it began to fade. "Oh, and watch out, there's a two-pointer hiding behind that pillar." This pattern continued throughout the exam. Izuku would fight robots, guided by both One for All and the advice of spirits, while also helping any trapped souls he encountered. The spirits, in turn, helped him by warning him of approaching robots and pointing out structural weaknesses. Then came the zero-pointer. As the massive robot emerged, causing panic among the examinees, Izuku noticed something the others couldn't see: spirits of previous examinees trapped in its path, their forms tied to the rubble of their fatal encounters. They can't move on until someone helps them, Nana explained quickly. Their deaths here bind them to this place. But before Izuku could focus on the spirits, he heard Uraraka's cry of pain. She was trapped under debris, directly in the zero-pointer's path. And around her, more spirits were gathering, their faces showing concern for the living girl who reminded them of their own final moments. Not this time, Izuku muttered, one for all surging through his body. The spirits of previous users gathered around him, their power adding to his own. What happened next would become legend at UA. Witnesses would describe how Midoriya seemed to glow with an otherworldly light as he leaped toward the zero-pointer. What they couldn't see were the spirits of fallen heroes lending their strength, their forms briefly visible as green lightning crackled around Izuku's body. The punch that destroyed the zero-pointer was powered by more than just one for all. It carried the combined will of countless spirits, their desire to prevent another tragedy like their own channeled through Izuku's determination. As the robot collapsed, Izuku didn't just save Uraraka. He also freed the trapped spirits, their forms finally able to move on as the source of their binding was destroyed. Their gratitude manifested as a gentle light that helped ease his descent, though the other examinees would attribute his slower fall to Uraraka's quirk alone. In Recovery Girl's office after the exam, Izuku had an unexpected encounter. While the elderly hero treated his injuries, he noticed the spirit of a young nurse watching the procedure with professional interest. I worked here during the sports festival tragedy 30 years ago, the spirit explained, seeing his questioning look. Recovery Girl was just starting then. She blamed herself when she couldn't save me, but it wasn't her fault. She still keeps your picture on her desk, Izuku whispered when Recovery Girl stepped away briefly. The ghost nurse smiled sadly. Tell her I never blamed her. And that she's saved so many more since then. When Recovery Girl returned, Izuku passed on the message, watching tears form in the elderly hero's eyes. Miyako, she whispered, looking at the photograph. I always wondered, thank you, young man, for giving an old woman some peace. The days following the exam were tense with waiting, but Izuku wasn't idle. The spirits of UA had recognized him as someone who could help them, and they sought him out with increasing frequency. There's a student spirit in the support course workshop, one ghost would report. She's been trying to complete her final project for decades. The old sports festival grounds have several spirits trapped by regret, another would add. They never got to finish their matches. Izuku helped where he could, making trips to UA's grounds under the pretense of checking on his application. Each spirit he helped seemed to strengthen his connection to both One for All and the spiritual realm. When his acceptance letter finally arrived, it came with an unexpected addition. All Might's hologram announcement was impressive enough, but what really caught Izuku's attention was the spirit standing behind the hero in the recording, a former UA principal, watching with approval. We've been waiting for someone like you, the ghostly principal said as the hologram ended. UA has many secrets, young Midoriya, and not all of them are known to the living. Culminates with Izuku's first day at UA. As he stands before the imposing gates once again, he sees the school differently now. Beyond the physical building, he perceives layers of spiritual energy, decades of hopes, dreams, and sacrifices woven into the very fabric of the institution. The spirits of former students and teachers line the path to Class 1A, offering encouragement and advice. Among them, Nana Shimura stands proudly beside her successor's successor. Remember, she says as Izuku reaches for the classroom door, you're not just here to become a hero for the living. UA needs a guardian for its spirits too. Inside, Izuku finds both his living classmates and a host of spiritual observers. The ghost of a former Class 1A student sits in his assigned seat, smiling as he approaches. I've been waiting for someone who could see me, the spirit says, standing to let Izuku take the seat. There's so much we need to tell you about this place. As Aizawa makes his dramatic entrance, sleeping bag and all, Izuku notices a spirit in similar underground hero costume watching the teacher with exasperated fondness. This, he realizes, is what it means to be UA's spiritual guardian, seeing the layers of history and connection that others can't, helping both the living and the dead find their way forward. The day proceeds with its challenges. Aizawa's quirk assessment test, meeting his classmates, learning to navigate UA's complex social and academic environment. But through it all, Izuku maintains his dual awareness, helping lost spirits even as he works to prove himself to his living teachers and peers. During the quirk assessment test, the spirits of former students offer advice and encouragement. When Aizawa threatens to expel the lowest scorer, a ghost wearing an old UA uniform whispers, "He's bluffing. He did the same thing in my day." The ball throw event becomes particularly interesting when Izuku channels One for All. The spirits of previous users gather around him, their power manifesting in ways that make even Aizawa pause. The teacher's capture weapon rises slightly, responding to spiritual energy he can't quite perceive but instinctively senses. "Your quirk," Aizawa notes, his eyes narrowing. "There's something unusual about it." "You have no idea," comments the ghost of his former underground hero colleague, though only Izuku can hear the amusement in their voice. By day's end, Izuku has begun to understand the true scope of his role at UA. He's not just a student, or even just All Might's successor. He's become something unprecedented in the school's history, a bridge between UA's past and present, a guardian of both its living students and spiritual residents. As he prepares to leave for the day, the spirit of the former principal appears again. "You've done well," they say, their form more solid in the setting sun. "But remember, young Midoriya, UA's spirits aren't just here to help you, they're here because they need help too. Each has their own story, their own unfinished business. Some have been waiting decades for someone who could see them, hear them, help them move on." Izuku nods, understanding the responsibility being placed on his shoulders. It's not enough to simply become a hero for the living. He must also be a guide for the dead, helping them find the peace they couldn't achieve in life. As he walks home, spirits of UA's past walking beside him, Izuku reflects on how his journey has already become something far more complex than he initially imagined. He's not just training to be a hero, he's becoming a guardian of two worlds, a protector of both the living and the dead. The sun sets on his first day at UA, casting long shadows across the campus grounds. But to Izuku's unique vision, the school glows with spiritual light, countless souls watching over their successors, waiting for their stories to be heard, their peace to be found. And in the gathering darkness, a new one that will test not just his ability to master One for All, but his capacity to serve as a bridge between worlds, a guardian of both UA's present and its lingering past. The spirits of heroes past gather one last time before dispersing for the night, their forms creating patterns of ghostly light that only their chosen guardian can see. Tomorrow will bring new challenges, new spirits seeking help, new opportunities to prove that being a hero means more than just saving those who still draw breath. For now, though, Izuku Midoriya walks home, carrying the weight of two worlds on his shoulders, but feeling lighter than ever before. He's found his place, not just as a hero in training, but as UA's spiritual guardian, a role that will change both him and the prestigious Heroes School in ways no one could have predicted. And somewhere in the spiritual realm, watching with growing interest, darker entities take notice of the boy who can bridge the gap between life and death. The true test of UA's new guardian is yet to come, when the barriers between worlds grow thin, and the lines between hero and spirit blur in ways that will challenge everything he thought he knew about both life and death. The first few weeks at UA settled into a rhythm unlike anything Izuku could have imagined. While his classmates focused on their heroic studies, he juggled a double curriculum, the official one for living students, and an unofficial one guided by the spirits of UA's past. Every morning began with ghost duty, as he'd started calling it. Before classes, he'd make rounds through the campus, checking out spirits who needed help and gathering intelligence from those who kept watch over the school. "There's a new spirit in the support department," reported a ghostly security guard from the 1980s. "Poor kid got overwhelmed during a late-night project. She's having trouble accepting what happened." Izuku made a mental note to visit the support workshop during lunch. These small missions had become as much a part of his hero training as combat practice and quirk development. But maintaining his secret was becoming increasingly challenging, especially during hero training. "Today's exercise will focus on rescue operations," All Might announced to Class 1A, his larger-than-life presence commanding attention. What the others couldn't see was Nana Shimura's spirit standing beside him, occasionally whispering suggestions in his ear that he couldn't hear but somehow seemed to intuitively follow. The training ground was set up as a disaster zone, complete with collapsed buildings and simulated hazards. What All Might hadn't mentioned, and possibly didn't know, was that the area was also home to several spirits, victims of past training accidents who remained to warn future students of potential dangers. Partner up! All Might commanded. One student will play victim, the other rescuer. Then you'll switch roles. Izuku found himself paired with Todoroki, whose dual-colored hair seemed to fascinate several of the watching spirits. He has his father's power, one ghost commented, but his mother's heart. As they prepared for the exercise, Izuku noticed something unusual, a faint spiritual presence around Todoroki, different from the usual ghosts. It felt like an echo of pain, of cold hospital rooms and burning tears. His mother's suffering left an imprint on him, Nana explained softly. Some traumas leave spiritual marks that those like you can sense. The exercise began, with Todoroki playing victim first. As Izuku worked to rescue him from a collapsed structure, he found himself aided by the spirits of former rescue heroes, their expertise guiding his movements. Check the structural integrity before moving that beam, one ghost advised. There's a weak point to your left. The temperature changes from his quirk have made the concrete unstable, another added. Be careful. Izuku incorporated their advice smoothly, making it look like careful analysis rather than spiritual guidance. But Aizawa, watching from nearby, noticed something odd about his students' movements. His rescue technique, the teacher muttered to himself, it's reminiscent of old-school methods. But how would he know those? When it was Izuku's turn to play victim, things got more complicated. The spirits became agitated, their protective instincts flaring as Todoroki approached. The boy's spiritual trauma is affecting his judgment, one ghost warned. His flames, he's hesitating to use them even when they'd be the safer option. Izuku had to resist the urge to tell Todoroki about his mother's spirit, which he'd glimpsed occasionally around campus. She wasn't dead, he knew, but her emotional pain had created a kind of spiritual echo that followed her son. The real challenge came during battle training. The class was divided into heroes and villains, with Izuku paired with Uraraka against Bakugo and Ida. But they weren't the only ones present in the training building. This place has seen many battles, a spirit in an old UA uniform explained. Some of us stay to watch, to learn, to remember. As Bakugo came charging in, his explosions lighting up the corridors, Izuku noticed something that gave him pause. Around his childhood friend, there swirled a mass of dark spiritual energy, not evil, but troubled, born from years of unchecked aggression and buried insecurities. Young hearts can create powerful spiritual disturbances, Nana commented. His soul is crying out for help, even if he doesn't know it. The battle that followed was unlike anything his classmates had seen. While they saw Izuku dodging Bakugo's explosions with uncanny precision, they couldn't see the spirits of former students helping him predict his opponent's movements, or the way One for All's previous users gathered around him, their combined spiritual energy manifesting as green lightning. There's something weird about Deku's quirk, Bakugo growled after a particularly close exchange. It's like he knows what I'm going to do before I do it. The fight culminated in a moment that would leave both participants shaken. As Bakugo launched his biggest explosion yet, Izuku channeled One for All while simultaneously drawing on the spiritual energy around him. The resulting clash created a brief moment where the barrier between worlds thinned, and for just a second, Bakugo saw them. All of them. The spirits of heroes past, the watching ghosts, the spiritual energy that surrounded his childhood friend. The moment passed quickly, but its effect was immediate. Bakugo stumbled backward, his eyes wide with something between fear and understanding. What was that? He demanded, his voice lacking its usual aggression. Deku, what did you do? But before Izuku could respond, All Might called the match, declaring the hero team victorious. The conversation would have to wait. Later that day, in the locker room, Izuku found himself cornered by Bakugo. But instead of the usual anger, there was something different in his rival's expression. That thing I saw, Bakugo said quietly, uncharacteristically serious. During the fight. That wasn't just your quirk, was it? Izuku hesitated, looking to Nana for guidance. She nodded encouragingly. No, he admitted. It's complicated. I can see things others can't. Spirits, ghosts, emotional echoes. I've always been able to, even before. Before what? Bakugo pressed. But they were interrupted by Kirishima and Kaminari, bursting into the locker room with excitement over the day's training. The moment passed, but something had changed between the childhood friends. Bakugo began watching Izuku more closely, noticing the way he sometimes seemed to respond to things no one else could see or hear. The change in dynamic didn't go unnoticed by Aizawa. The underground hero had been observing Midoriya with increasing interest, noting patterns that didn't quite add up. The boy knows things he shouldn't, Aizawa commented to present Mike one evening. Fighting techniques that haven't been taught in decades, details about the school's history that aren't in any public records. Maybe he's just a good researcher? Present Mike suggested. No, Aizawa shook his head. It's more than that. Sometimes he reacts to things before they happen, moves like he's being guided. And his quirk, there's something about it that feels old. What Aizawa couldn't see was his own spiritual guardian, the ghost of his former underground hero mentor, standing behind him, smiling proudly at his protégé's sharp observations. The situation came to a head during a routine rescue training exercise. The class was practicing earthquake response scenarios when one of the support pillars in the training ground actually began to collapse, not part of the planned exercise. Before anyone could react, Izuku was moving. The spirits of former rescue heroes had warned him seconds before the structure failed, their centuries of combined experience recognizing the signs. Everyone, get back! He shouted, one for all flowing through him as he braced the falling pillar. But what his classmates saw as quick thinking was actually a coordinated effort between the living and the dead. Spirits of former heroes helped guide students to safety, their invisible presence creating cold spots that instinctively made people move away from danger. Izuku, channeling both one for all and the spiritual energy around him, managed to hold the pillar long enough for Cementos to arrive and stabilize the structure. In the aftermath, as the dust settled, Aizawa pulled Izuku aside. Midoriya, he said, his tired eyes somehow more intense than usual. I think it's time we had a talk about what's really going on with you. Izuku looked around at the gathering spirits. Nana, the former UA staff, the rescue heroes who had helped prevent disaster. They all nodded encouragingly. Yes, sir, he replied. But you might want to sit down for this. It's quite a story. The conversation that followed, held in Aizawa's office with All Might present, would change everything. Izuku explained about his ability to see spirits, about how they had guided and taught him, about the true nature of one for all as both a physical and spiritual power. That explains a lot, Aizawa said finally, running a hand through his disheveled hair. The old techniques, the precise movements, the way you seem to know things. You've been getting help from spirits this whole time. Not just help, All Might added, his skeletal form somehow more imposing in the serious moment. Young Midoriya has been helping them too. Isn't that right? Izuku nodded, describing his unofficial role as UA's spiritual guardian. As he spoke, the office grew colder, and even Aizawa, typically immune to supernatural phenomena, felt a presence. They're here now, aren't they? The teacher asked, his capture weapon shifting slightly in response to the spiritual energy. Yes, Izuku confirmed. My mentor, Nana Shimura, and several others. They've been watching over UA for years, helping protect the students in ways most people never notice. Aizawa was quiet for a long moment, processing this information. Finally, he spoke. This doesn't change your status as a student, Midoriya. But, perhaps we can find ways to make better use of your unique abilities. Officially, of course. Of course, Izuku agreed, relief flooding through him. Though, there is one more thing you should know. He went on to explain about the spiritual disturbances he'd been sensing lately. Dark energies gathering around certain areas, spirits becoming more agitated. Something was coming, something that would test both the living and the dead. The League of Villains, a ghost in tattered hero costume interrupted, materializing suddenly. They're planning something. Something big. Izuku relayed the warning, watching his teacher's expressions grow grave. This was the true value of his ability. Not just helping individual spirits, but serving as a bridge between worlds, gathering intelligence that could save lives. We'll need to be prepared, Aizawa said, already planning. Midoriya, I want you to start documenting everything the spirits tell you about potential threats. All Might will need to adjust the training program to account for this new information. As the meeting concluded, Izuku felt a weight lift from his shoulders. His secret was out, at least to those who needed to know, and with it came new possibilities for using his abilities to protect both the living and the dead. With Izuku standing on Yue's roof at sunset surrounded by the spirits who had become his teachers, friends, and fellow guardians. Things will be different now, Nana said, her spectral form glowing in the fading light. Better, I think, Izuku replied. We can do more good working together, living and dead. Around them, Yue's campus hummed with spiritual energy. Decades of hopes, dreams, and sacrifices woven into its very foundations. And somewhere in the gathering darkness, shadows stirred, hinting at the challenges to come. But Izuku Midoriya, Class 1A's secret spiritual guardian, stood ready. With one for all flowing through him, the wisdom of generations guiding him, and the trust of his teachers supporting him, he would face whatever came next, for the sake of both worlds he now bridged. The sun set on a new era at Yue, where the line between the living and the dead had grown just a little bit thinner, and where a young hero in training had finally found his true calling as a guardian of both realms. And in the darkness, watching with growing interest, forces both spiritual and physical gathered strength. The true test of Yue's spiritual guardian was approaching, a confrontation that would shake both worlds to their core. But that was a story for another day. For now, Izuku had homework to complete, spirits to help, and a new balance to maintain between his official role as a student and his unofficial duty as Yue's bridge between worlds. The spirits of heroes past gathered around him one last time before dispersing for the night, their forms creating patterns of ghostly light that only their chosen guardian could see. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, but for the first time since discovering his abilities, Izuku felt truly ready to face them, not alone, but with the support of both the living and the dead. The sports festival arena buzzed with energy, both physical and spiritual. As Class 1A prepared for their big moment, Izuku found himself overwhelmed by the sheer number of spirits gathered for the event. They filled the stands alongside the living spectators, generations of former students and heroes come to witness the next generation's triumph. The spiritual energy is different today, Nana observed, floating beside Izuku as he stretched. Can you feel it? There's something darker. She was right. Among the usual ghostly spectators, Izuku noticed new spirits, angry ones, their forms twisted by bitterness and regret. They clustered in the shadows of the arena, whispering among themselves. Stain's ideology is spreading, one of Yue's ghostly security guards reported, materializing beside Izuku. It's affecting the spiritual realm. Spirits of heroes who died in disgrace, victims of corrupt heroes. They're being drawn to his message. Before Izuku could respond, President Mick's voice boomed through the stadium, announcing the start of the festival. As Class 1A marched out, Izuku noticed something that made his blood run cold, a spirit following Todoroki, but not his mother's usual gentle presence. This one was darker, wrapped in flames and scarred flesh. Endeavor's legacy, Nana explained grimly. The pain he's caused has taken spiritual form. The obstacle race brought its own challenges. While other students focused on the physical barriers, Izuku had to navigate through crowds of spirits, some helpful, others decidedly not. Watch out! Called the ghost of a former sports festival participant. The minefield pattern is the same as when I didn't make it. But for every helpful spirit, there seemed to be an angry one trying to interfere. A particularly vengeful ghost, its hero costume torn and bloody, attempted to distract Izuku by passing through him repeatedly, causing waves of cold that made him stumble. You new heroes, the spirit spat, its voice distorted by rage, you're all the same. Glory seekers. Just like the one who left me to die. Izuku couldn't stop to help, not during the race. But he made a mental note to find this spirit later. Something about its anger resonated with the growing darkness he'd been sensing. The race ended with Izuku in a respectable position, though few understood how he managed to avoid so many obstacles with seemingly supernatural precision. Only Aizawa, watching from the announcer's booth, understood the true extent of his students' performance. The cavalry battle brought new complications. As teams formed, Izuku found himself not just strategizing about quirks and points, but also dealing with an increasingly hostile spiritual environment. They're gathering, Nana warned, pointing to the shadows where vengeful spirits clustered. Something's drawing them here. Todoroki approached Izuku about forming a team, and the moment he did, the dark spirit following him flared with intense heat. Izuku had to resist the urge to flinch from the spiritual flames. I need to talk to you, Izuku said quietly to Todoroki. About your mother's spirit. Todoroki's heterochromatic eyes widened slightly. What did you say? But there was no time for explanation. The event was starting, and they had to focus on the physical challenge at hand. Yet, even as they fought to protect their points, Izuku couldn't ignore the growing spiritual disturbance in the arena. The vengeful spirits were becoming more active, their negative energy affecting the living in subtle ways. Bakugo's explosions grew more aggressive, Todoroki's ice more jagged, and throughout the arena, students found themselves inexplicably angry or afraid. This is bad, said the ghost of a former UA teacher, materializing beside Izuku during a brief pause in the action. The barrier between worlds is thinning. These vengeful spirits, they're being drawn to something. Or someone. During the lunch break before the tournament, Izuku finally had his chance to talk with Todoroki. They met in a quiet corridor, away from the crowds, but they weren't alone. Spirits gathered to witness the conversation, including the gentle presence of Todoroki's mother's emotional echo. Your mother, Izuku began carefully, her spirit, or rather, an echo of her feelings. It's been watching over you. Todoroki's face remained impassive, but his spiritual aura flickered with emotion. What do you mean? I can see spirits, Izuku explained, deciding directness was best. Not just ghosts, but emotional imprints left by strong feelings. Your mother's love for you. It's created a presence that follows you, trying to protect you. As he spoke, the temperature in the corridor dropped. The dark, flame-wrapped spirit that had been haunting Todoroki manifested more strongly, trying to drown out the gentle presence of his mother's love. But there's another spirit too, Izuku continued. One born from pain and fear. It's your father's influence, I think. The trauma he caused. Todoroki's right side frosted over slightly. You're saying you can see, what? The ghosts of my family problems? Not exactly ghosts, Izuku shook his head. More like emotional scars given form. And they're getting stronger because of what's happening in the city. Stain's ideology, the growing darkness. It's affecting the spiritual realm, making negative emotions more powerful. Before Todoroki could respond, a new spirit appeared, one that made both boys step back. It wore a hero costume stained with blood, its face twisted in a grotesque smile. Yes, the spirit hissed. Feel the pain. The betrayal. Heroes aren't what they pretend to be. Your father proved that, didn't he, young Todoroki? Izuku moved instinctively, placing himself between Todoroki and the vengeful spirit. One for all crackled around him as he drew on the power of previous users. You don't belong here, he said firmly to the spirit. This isn't your pain to use. The spirit laughed, a hollow sound that echoed through the corridor. Oh, but it is. All pain belongs to us now. Stain has shown us the way. The age of false heroes is ending. With a gesture, the spirit summoned others of its kind, victims of hero society's failures, those who died believing in heroes who let them down. They filled the corridor with their dark presence, their combined negative energy making both boys shiver. But they weren't defenseless. The gentle spirit of Todoroki's mother's love grew stronger, pushing back against the darkness. And behind Izuku, the spirits of One for All's previous users gathered, their power flowing through him. Young Todoroki, Izuku said, green lightning crackling around him, your power isn't your father's. It's yours. And your mother's spirit, she wants you to be free. As if in response to his words, the temperature in the corridor stabilized. Todoroki's left side sparked, small flames dancing along his arm as he finally began to understand. My power, he whispered, and for a moment he seemed to sense what Izuku could see, the loving presence of his mother's spirit, the supportive energy of heroes past, the possibility of breaking free from the dark spirit of his father's influence. The vengeful spirits recoiled as Todoroki ignited his left side fully for the first time since his childhood. The flames weren't the harsh, dominating fire of endeavor, but a warming blaze that seemed to cleanse the spiritual energy around them. This isn't over, the lead vengeful spirit warned as it faded. Stain's message spreads. The darkness grows. Soon, All heroes will face judgment, living and dead. The tournament matches that followed were unlike anything in UA's history, though few understood why. Each fight was contested on two levels: the physical battle that the audience could see, and the spiritual struggle that only Izuku could witness. When Todoroki fought, his newfound acceptance of his full power helped dispel the dark spirit that had haunted him. His mother's loving presence grew stronger, guiding his flames to protect rather than destroy. Bakugo's matches were complicated by the vengeful spirits attempting to fuel his rage. But Izuku noticed something interesting. The ghost of Bakugo's childhood dog, a friendly presence he'd noticed before, stayed close to the explosive boy, helping calm his spiritual energy. But it was Izuku's own matches that truly demonstrated the growing spiritual conflict. Each fight attracted more vengeful spirits, drawn to the power of One for All and his unique ability to see them. During his match with Shinso, the vengeful spirits tried to take advantage of the brainwashing effect, whispering dark thoughts into Izuku's mind. But the previous users of One for All fought back, their combined will helping him break free. The final match between Izuku and Todoroki became a turning point. As they clashed with ice, fire, and One for All, the spiritual energy in the stadium reached a crescendo. The vengeful spirits gathered in force, trying to corrupt their powers with darkness and rage. But something unexpected happened. As Todoroki finally embraced his full power, accepting both his fire and ice as his own, his mother's loving presence grew strong enough for others to sense. Throughout the stadium, people felt an inexplicable warmth, a feeling of hope that pushed back against the encroaching darkness. Izuku, channeling both One for All and the positive spiritual energy around him, met Todoroki's flames with power that glowed with more than just physical energy. For a brief moment, the barrier between worlds thinned enough for everyone in the stadium to see what he saw: the spirits of heroes past standing with him, the loving presence protecting Todoroki, and the vengeful spirits fleeing from their combined light. The match ended in a spectacular clash that left both boys standing, forever changed by what had transpired. Though Todoroki took the victory, both had won something more important: a deeper understanding of the forces at work in their world. After the festival, as the crowds dispersed and the living celebrated or commiserated their performances, Izuku met with Aizawa and All Might in a quiet corner of the stadium. "The spiritual disturbance is getting worse," he reported, watching more vengeful spirits gather in the city's shadows. "Stain's ideology isn't just affecting the living, it's giving power to spirits who died feeling betrayed by heroes. Can they cause real harm?" Aizawa asked, his capture weapon shifting uneasily in response to spiritual energy he could sense but not see. "Not directly," Izuku explained. "But they can influence emotions, make people more aggressive or afraid. And if they gather enough negative energy, they could potentially manifest in ways even normal humans could see," Nana finished, though only Izuku could hear her. All Might, in his skeletal form, looked troubled. "Young Midoriya, it seems your role as UA's spiritual guardian may be more important than we realized. These vengeful spirits, they're a symptom of deeper problems in Heroes society. Problems that Stain is exposing," Izuku nodded. "But his way isn't the answer. It's just creating more darkness, more pain." "Then what is the answer?" Todoroki asked, approaching the group. He'd clearly been listening, and after his experience during their match, he seemed more open to discussing spiritual matters. Izuku looked at the spirits gathered around them, the previous users of One for All, the protective presence of Todoroki's mother's love, the ghostly UA staff who had watched over generations of students. "Balance," he said finally. "We need to acknowledge the pain and corruption in Hero society, but not let it consume us. We need to remember why people become heroes in the first place, not for glory or power, but to help others. To be a light in the darkness," All Might added, somehow looking more like his heroic form despite his gaunt appearance. As if in response to their words, the spiritual energy in the stadium shifted. The vengeful spirits retreated further into the shadows, but Izuku knew they weren't gone. They were gathering strength, waiting for their moment. "Something's coming," he warned. "Something that will test all of us, living and dead." With Izuku standing in the empty stadium, watching the sun set over UA. Around him, spirits of all kinds moved through the growing shadows, the vengeful ones lurking at the edges, the protective ones standing guard, and in between, countless others waiting to see which way the balance would tip. The sports festival was over, but a greater battle was just beginning. A battle not just for the future of Heroes Society, but for the very soul of what it meant to be a hero. And Izuku Midoriya, standing between worlds with One for All's power flowing through him, knew he would need every ally he could get, living and dead, to face what was coming. The spirits of heroes past gathered close, their presence a reminder that he wasn't alone in this fight. Together, they would face the growing darkness, working to restore balance to both worlds before it was too late. But as night fell over UA, the vengeful spirit's warning echoed through both realms. The age of false heroes was ending. The only question was what would rise in its place: a new era of true heroism, or a darkness that would consume both the living and the dead. The training camp started like any other UA activity, with Izuku seeing far more than his classmates could. The forest surrounding the camp was alive with spiritual energy, home to countless spirits of nature and forgotten heroes who had fallen in these remote mountains. The veil is thinner here, Nana explained as Class 1A unloaded their buses. Away from the city, away from modern life, spirits find it easier to manifest. Izuku nodded, watching ethereal forms drift between the trees. Most were peaceful lost hikers, old forest guardians, spirits of the land itself. But there was something else, something that made the ghostly sentries who watched over UA's students shift uneasily. Darkness gathers, whispered a spirit in tattered hero costume, materializing beside Izuku. The League of Villains. They bring something worse than physical threats. Before Izuku could ask for clarification, Aizawa called the class to attention. The training camp's true location had been kept secret. But looking at the restless spirits, Izuku wondered if that would be enough. The first warning came during quirk training. While his classmates focused on strengthening their abilities, Izuku worked on balancing One for All with his spiritual awareness. The previous users had been teaching him to channel their residual quirks more effectively, but something kept interfering. The barriers weakening, the first user's spirit warned during a brief break. All for One's influence. It's corrupting the spiritual realm. What do you mean? Izuku asked, keeping his voice low as Kota passed nearby. His actions have consequences beyond the physical world, Nana explained. Each quirk he steals, each life he takes, it creates disturbances that ripple through both realms. A cold wind swept through the training ground, carrying whispers of malice. The peaceful forest spirits retreated, leaving only the more militant ghostly guardians. They're coming, a spirit scout reported, its form flickering with urgency. The League. They bring spirits twisted by All for One's power. Izuku immediately sought out Aizawa, who had been briefed about his students' unique abilities. Sensei, we have a problem. The attack came at night, but not as anyone expected. While the League of Villains launched their physical assault, something far worse slipped through the weakened veil between worlds. Izuku was the first to sense it, a wave of corrupted spiritual energy that made even the bravest ghost guardians recoil. Through the trees came shapes that shouldn't exist, spirits twisted by All for One's experiments, victims of quirk theft whose very souls had been warped into weapons. Protect the students, Nana commanded, rallying the ghostly defenders. Don't let them break through. But these weren't ordinary spirits. They moved with purpose, guided by a malevolent intelligence that knew exactly how to exploit the thin veil between worlds. As Izuku watched in horror, they began to manifest in ways the living could see, shadowy forms that brought primal fear to anyone who glimpsed them. What are those things? Kirishima shouted, his hardening quirk activating instinctively as a shadow passed through him. Everyone, stay together! Izuku called out, One for All crackling around him as he tried to coordinate both physical and spiritual defenses. The spirits here, they're trying to help us. Indeed, the forest's guardian spirits had formed a protective barrier around the students, their ancient power pushing back against the corrupted ones. But it wasn't enough. Through the chaos, Izuku spotted Kota running toward his secret hideout, unaware of the twisted spirit pursuing him. Without hesitation, he gave chase, calling on both One for All and the power of his ghostly allies. The confrontation that followed would be remembered in both realms. Muscular's physical attack was devastating enough, but what the others couldn't see was the corrupted spirit working with him, the essence of someone whose quirk All for One had stolen to give to the villain. You see us, don't you, boy? The spirit hissed, its form writhing with unnatural energy. See what your precious hero society allowed to happen. Izuku stood his ground, positioning himself between the threats and Koda. One for all surged through him at 100%, while the spirits of previous users gathered their power. What happened to you was wrong, Izuku acknowledged, addressing both muscular and the twisted spirit. But this isn't the way to make it right. The battle that followed took place on two fronts. While Izuku's body fought muscular with everything he had, his spiritual awareness engaged in a desperate struggle to prevent the corrupted spirit from possessing Koda. Young Midoriya, the first user, called out, "Channel our power." All of it. In that moment, as Muscular's attack threatened to overwhelm him, Izuku felt something new. The barrier between worlds had grown so thin that power could flow freely between them. The spirits of One for All's users weren't just lending him strength, they were manifesting through him. The punch that finally defeated Muscular carried more than just physical force. It bore the combined will of generations of heroes, living and dead, their power visible even to normal eyes as green lightning tinged with spectral fire. But the victory came at a cost. The effort of channeling so much spiritual energy, combined with One for All's physical toll, left Izuku barely able to move. And all around them, the forest burned as more villains and corrupted spirits pressed their attack. Thereafter Bakugo, a ghost scout, reported, materializing beside Izuku as he struggled to rejoin his classmates. But not just his body, they want his spirit too. The revelation hit Izuku hard. Of course Bakugo's powerful quirk would be a prime target for All for One, and in this place where the veil was so thin, taking both body and spirit would make the theft complete. Through the chaos of fire and fighting, Izuku could see spiritual battles raging alongside physical ones. Ghostly defenders clashed with corrupted spirits, while students and villains fought below. But something was wrong with the very fabric of reality. The barrier between worlds was unraveling. This is what they wanted, Nana realized, her form becoming clearer as the veil thinned further. The attack isn't just about taking Bakugo, it's about weakening the barrier between life and death itself. Izuku fought his way toward where he last saw Bakugo, guided by both living allies and spiritual guardians. But the corruption was spreading. Each villain seemed to have their own twisted spirit companion, their combined power making them nearly unstoppable. Then he saw a sight that made his blood run cold. Around Bakugo, barely visible even to his enhanced perception, formed a cage of spiritual energy. The League wasn't just trying to capture him physically, they were attempting to bind his very soul. "Kaken!" Izuku screamed, pushing his broken body forward. But he was too late. The moment Bakugo vanished into Kurogiri's warp gate, something fundamental shifted in both realms. The barrier, already dangerously thin, threatened to tear completely. "Everyone, fall back!" Aizawa ordered, his capture weapon lashing out at both physical and partially manifested spiritual enemies. "We can't let them take anyone else." The retreat was chaos incarnate. Students fled through burning woods while spirits of all kinds clashed above them. The corrupted ones pursued relentlessly, their twisted forms becoming more solid as the veil continued to weaken. It was Todoroki who bought them crucial time, his ice and fire creating a barrier that somehow affected both physical and spiritual opponents. Izuku realized the truth. Todoroki's power, born from both love and pain, naturally bridged the gap between worlds. In the aftermath, as emergency services arrived and the remaining students were evacuated, Izuku met with his teachers to report what he'd seen. "All for One," he explained, his voice hoarse from smoke and screaming. "He's not just stealing quirks anymore. He's corrupting spirits, using them to weaken the barrier between worlds. Can you sense where they took young Bakugo?" All Might asked, his skeletal form seeming more fragile than ever. Izuku closed his eyes, reaching out with his spiritual awareness. But the corruption left behind by the League's attack interfered with his perception. "It's all twisted," he said frustratedly. "The spiritual trails, they're being deliberately obscured." "They knew about your ability," Aizawa concluded grimly. "This wasn't just an attack on UA, it was an attack on both realms." The implications were staggering. If All for One could corrupt spirits and weaken the barrier between worlds, what else might he be capable of? Could he potentially gain control over death itself? That night, as the students were gathered at the hospital, Izuku received an unexpected visitor. The spirit of Bakugo's childhood dog appeared, more agitated than he'd ever seen it. He's afraid, the spirit whined, circling anxiously. My boy, they're doing something to him. Something wrong? Izuku sat up despite his injuries. Can you sense where he is? The spirit nodded, then shook its spectral head in confusion. Yes, no. The place is wrong. It feels like death but isn't. Like life but isn't. A place between worlds, Nana suggested. All for One is trying to break down the barriers completely. The realization of what was at stake hit Izuku hard. This wasn't just about saving Bakugo anymore, it was about preventing a catastrophe that could affect both the living and the dead. Looking around the hospital room, he saw spirits of all kinds gathering, former heroes ready to help, victims of All for One seeking justice, ancient guardians awakening to face the threat. The veil between worlds had been damaged, but perhaps that could work in their favor. We need to find him, Izuku declared, struggling to his feet. Before All for One can complete whatever he's planning. You won't be alone, said a new voice. In the doorway stood Kirishima, and behind him, Izuku could see the spirits of ancient warriors lending their strength to the hardening hero. I can't see what you see, Kirishima continued, but after what happened in the forest, I know there's more going on than what's visible. And I want to help. One by one, other students joined them. Though they couldn't see the spirits gathering around them, they could feel something, a sense of purpose, of destiny, of forces beyond their understanding rallying to their cause. With Izuku looking out the hospital window at a sky filled with more than just stars. Spirits of all kinds moved through the night, some corrupted, some pure, all aware that a crucial moment approached. The veil between worlds had been damaged, but perhaps that was both a curse and an opportunity. With the barriers weakened, the power of the dead could more easily aid the living if they could act before All for One twisted that power to his own ends. We're running out of time, Nana warned, her form flickering with urgency. The barrier weakens further with each passing moment. Izuku nodded, feeling One for All pulse within him, not just as a quirk, but as a bridge between realms. Whatever came next would determine not just Bakugo's fate, but the future of both worlds. And in the darkness beyond the hospital, watching with eyes that saw both life and death, All for One smiled. The pieces were falling into place, and soon, the very nature of reality would bend to his will. But he hadn't counted on Yue's spiritual guardian, or the army of spirits ready to fight alongside him. The final battle would be fought not just in the physical world, but in the realm between life and death itself. The veil had grown thin, and through it, heroes of both worlds would soon pass to face their greatest challenge yet.